Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the marriage-based green cards and guide to U.S. permanent residency. My name is Ruby Powers with the Powers Law Group. I'm board certified, and the firm is 15 years old this month. And let's go ahead and just dive right into it. So, when there is a interview, there's some things to note. And what I will say is that there's not always an interview. We've seen this last year, they've been waiving it, but they could change that at any moment. And just because they waive it for some doesn't mean they'll waive it for everyone. So things to note, make sure that you show up on time, try to be calm and relaxed because I know it can be stressful. I went through this process a long time ago, 20-ish years ago with my husband. And, just be respectful, probably business casual would be great with clothes. And ideally bring an original or certified copy of civil documents because they want to double check that everything is accurate and legitimate. So that with civil documents are like marriage, birth, those types of things. If anyone was married before, divorce decree or death certificate, those types of things. When you're in the interview, you want to be respectful. And I definitely would suggest having the officer's name information and your notes. Hopefully you don't ever need to do anything with that, but it's better to be prepared. And the day before, figure out where you're going for the interview, think it through, try to make sure you get there on time to be able to go through security, have your documents. Also originals, things like passport or driver's license, those types of things are good to have. When you're in your, don't do these things. If you don't know the answer to something, ask for clarification. The officer might not know every single thing. They might have just opened your file earlier that day and are starting to just go through the motions and asking questions. If they're not asking specifically to you, depending on the tone and the environment, just make sure if they ask specifically to your spouse to have them answer the question. And if you don't know the answer, it's better to say, I don't know, or could you repeat the question? And I mean, I don't know if this has to even be said, but just make sure you don't lose your temper, or don't want it to get too heated in the interview, as that generally doesn't go well. Most interviews go really well, and if you're prepared, that's the better thing. Like we have this Murphy's Law, right? So if you have everything you need and you're prepared, then they're not going to ask for those things. But if you don't have it, then they're going to ask for it. That seems to happen all the time, right? So things that they're considering in an application that could trigger you to getting an interview and or having an issue in the interview would be if there's a large age gap between spouses. They're also looking for things like big differences in cultural backgrounds, language, religion, education, those types of things. If you haven't been married that long and before you file, that can be a red flag, but sometimes people have been together a long time and they have that history and they can show that. If you have different addresses showing up online or in documentation, if you're late, if you don't have all the documents, if you have the wrong information, this can definitely trigger problems. And the interview questions will be about like your relationship history. How did you meet? Who proposed? Who was at your wedding? Who wakes up when? What does your spouse do? They could even ask, well, how much money does your spouse make? Or where do they work? Questions about stepkids and other kids, personal habits, and what did you give each other for the last birthday or anniversary? What's their favorite restaurant? What do you do on a typical day after work or something like that? So those are the things that could be asked. And generally, a few of these questions are pretty normal and they could go into more detail. So what I would suggest is getting ready for an interview is make sure you refresh your memory, look over the applications that you submitted, see if there's any edits that need to be made, collect your documents before. Usually there's what was submitted, and then there's what has happened since it was submitted. So in terms of evidence, and so bring up some more evidence just a good practice that's happened since you were submitted the application. But then also bring also those originals that I mentioned earlier. The originals or certified copies of some of those key civil documents, and be organized. If you do bring a photo album, they're just going to flip through it and look at it, but they're going to like it, but they're not going to have to submit it in the record. So documents to consider that you will need: birth certificate, marriage, financial documents, proof of the U.S. citizen's permanent residency or legal or citizenship, proof of lawful entry in the U.S. Or exception to that. If there is any criminal matters, the records of that. If there was a prior marriage, how that those marriages were terminated through divorce, death, things like that. And potentially military records and a medical exam would have already been submitted, very likely. If not, then you definitely would bring it to the interview. Now, timelines change. We're seeing I-130s are taking about a year, just a standalone I-130. But the crazy thing is, if you file an I-130 45 altogether for marriage, you might be seeing getting a green card in less than 6 months. So green card holders, depending on whether you're filing in the US or abroad, there's a different processing times with the visa availability. So those do change. So this really, the best way to know this is through a consultation and also a combo of looking at the USCIS website to see what their processing times are. But a lot of times they're not exactly accurate of what's really happening. Okay, so there's one thing else you need to know is that if you do go into the interview and they could separate you with you and your spouse, and then that they would do what they call a Stokes interview. And this is where if they thought there was any red flags or issues, they might not have already decided to do this, but they might have been like pretty prepared to do one, or they could just say, we're going to do this. And when you come in now, this usually is not a good sign. But if they do it, they're going to ask pretty much the same questions to each other, but you're not in the same room at the same time. Or they'll have one of you sit outside, ask the first person these questions, and then bring the other person in and ask the second person that was outside those questions while the first person's still sitting in the room, but they cannot answer. And then they're going to compare notes. So it could be like, what did you eat for dinner last night? Or what was the last gift that so-and-so gave you for your birthday? Or how did you celebrate your anniversary? And if the answers are glaringly different, then they're going to be very into fraudulent mode. So these are some things to consider. I haven't seen that many. I think I've only seen 3 in my whole 16 years of practice. They don't happen that often. So what are the possible outcomes? If you've been married less than 2 years at the time of adjudication, you will get the 2-year green card. If you've been married more than 2 years at that time, you'll get the 10-year green card. You could get a request for evidence. Maybe there's something that they want to see more of. They could say, oh, we need some time to review it. So maybe you just do nothing and you're waiting for it. They could potentially give you a second interview. That doesn't happen that often. There also could be a notice of intent to deny, and that still gives you an option, and that's better than a straight up denial. And then depending on those things, request for evidence, notice of intent to deny, it gives you an opportunity to respond. A denial, you pretty much would have to do an appeal or a motion to reopen, reconsider. Now, make sure to dress professional, keep an open mind, answer the questions. If you don't know, just ask for clarification, and you can have fun with it. Sometimes officers are pretty chill and nice, and you can be in and out in about 15 minutes. Sometimes they're pretty stern and serious, and you just sort of mimic the tone and be respectful of what's going on in the interview. But anyway, that's a brief overview. Definitely doesn't take the place of legal advice. You can always give us a call at 713-589 2085. We are Powers Law Group. We have a handful of attorneys that can help you, and we can attend interviews with you. We can help you with your marriage-based adjustment process. You can find us also on all these other places like Twitter and Instagram, X, Facebook, and you can also join us on our newsletter that comes out in English and Spanish every other week. So next week, we're going to be debriefing the election results and how those will affect immigration. Later in the month, we're going to be talking about O1 visas, which are a great opportunity. And then we're dealing with deportation, what not to do in immigration court. And so we're looking forward to having you join us. Definitely share this and let us know how we can be a resource for you. Thank you.